Okay, well, welcome everyone. Great to see you, and thanks for making the time out of your busy schedules to join me today. Just some quick introductions before we kick off into the presentation. We should be finishing around 11:40 today, UK time, so about 40 minutes. I'll try and keep it as short and sharp and sweet as possible, with enough time at the end to ask questions. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat box, and we can have a look at them at the end of the session, or we can have time to come on the microphone at the end as well, to have a discussion or any questions that hopefully you may have. My name is Nicholas McKie. I'll introduce myself in a bit more detail in a second, but I'd like to introduce our partnership as executive at Persyou, Karen Smith. So Karen, I'd like to say hello.
Hello. Hi. Yes, I help Nicholas with all the toing and froing between clients and schools and organisations, sort of behind the scenes most of the time, but nice to meet you.
Great, thanks, Karen. So yes, we're going to kick off today about how to create a coaching culture in your school. It is being recorded, so we'll also send you a copy of the recording, just in case you have to nip off or miss any bits as well. And so at the end, we'll have some time for some questions, and hopefully you can leave today having some of your questions answered and a little bit more, I suppose, informed potentially about how you can create coaching in your school. So let's kick off. A little bit about myself here. My name's Nicholas McKie, and I'm the director of Persyou Limited. And we work with schools, individuals across the world through one-to-one executive coaching, team coaching, and coaching culture awards for schools. So I'm a professional certified coach with the International Coach Federation. I have around about 2,000 paid hours now in my portfolio over the years. I've also been an associate professor at the University of Warwick in the UK, so I developed their PGCE international program, and lots of coaching and mentoring happened around trainees in that course as well. I've also been a school principal, so I've worked in various places: Japan, China, Egypt, as well as the US and the UK. And my background was music, so I was a professional bassoonist. I don't know if you know what a bassoon is, but a woodwind instrument. So I used to play in orchestras, went to music college, went playing orchestras around the world. And then I became a music teacher. So that's kind of how I started my journey. So now I'm firmly looking at coaching, and all the things like that kind of led me here in terms of the way that I was teaching, the music, and also the leadership and working at university levels has really crafted and given me an insight into how you can develop coaching in educational settings. So I want to frame this a little bit about why coaching. Coaching spoken about a lot, and especially over the last, I've noticed, 6 to 8 years, especially in education. And if we can look here around an organizational timeline, because there are some reasons potentially why coaching is quite a hot topic in education at the moment. So if we go back to organizational, I suppose, evolution to about 1,000 years, and we look on the left-hand side here, Frederick Laloux wrote a fantastic book about depicting different timelines, and he would call this the Red Era. So that's about 1,000 years ago. That's around that kind of idea of being impulsive. So that the guiding metaphor for that kind of organization would be a wolf pack. So one person would be in charge, and fear would be the glue that keeps people together. Just after that, we had the Amber Era, and that was around conformity. So a guiding metaphor for that would be the army. And that's very much like schools still are in a lot of respects in terms of scaling up, having systems and processes so that you can, I suppose, cater for a lot of people in the same organization. Then around 100 years ago, we had the Orange Movement, and that was around achievement, profit and loss, competitive advantage. And the guiding metaphor for that was machine. And machine, I suppose, was around this idea of getting everything in place so that we can really, I suppose, get the processes, systems, so that things work very, very smoothly. Then we had the Green Pluralistic. And the Green Pluralistic time was about 20, 25 years ago. And that was around the idea of a guiding metaphor, family. And you hear a lot about that in organizational literature, don't you? That everyone's a family here. And we're guided by family principles. And that was around, I suppose, everyone having a voice and getting consensus. Around about the time 5 years ago to 10 years ago, we started looking at this idea of a teal organization. And the teal organization was about a living organism. And a teal organization fits nicely, I suppose, with a coaching approach. And teal was around putting people at the heart of what you were doing, at the heart of education. So it was around people and focused on purpose. So this is about having, I suppose, an inner compass, disidentifying from the ego. And the key breakthroughs were things like wholeness and also self-management. So whereas a family is one potential system, with the teal evolutionary time, there's maybe a plurality of different systems and different teams working independently and codependently as well. And the guiding metaphor here is a living system. Now that really frames the idea of a coaching approach, because what happens and what sits at the nexus of coaching really is that personal responsibility, which is what you get when you have self-managing teams. So why use coaching? There was lots of benefits that have been seen in coaching, in things like improving staff performance, teaching practice, well-being spoken about a lot, isn't it? Also embedding continuing professional development. So looking at the dialogue around different themes. We've got the peer support, and that could be early career teachers, but also support throughout someone's career with trainee teachers potentially as well. And I think generally improving the conversations around professional development and professional learning. How are we having robust and fruitful discussions across our schools with different stakeholders? If we're looking at coaching culture, well, if we look outside of education here to the kind of wider organizations, then organizations with a strong coaching culture are more likely to have retention of high performers. So 62% see an increased retention of high performers. They're also more likely to have increased employee engagement scores than organizations who don't have a strong coaching culture. If you go further, 77% of organizations with strong coaching culture are more successful at attracting talent. And they're more likely to be classed as high performing. So as well as the benefits individually in terms of what coaching can bring, also for organizations, having a culture of coaching can have really strong resonance and strong improvement. So giving you a little bit of, I suppose, a framing there, first of all, in terms of the evolutionary cycle of organization, then I suppose the benefits individually, and then collectively of coaching culture. So what is a coaching culture? Well, for me, it's this. It is about creating an environment that actively engages or encourages engagement, development and learning. And it's about empowering people. And how do we do that? Well, we have effective dialogue underpinned by trust. I suppose there's different ways that you can get to this. And what I'm going to show you today is a pathway that we think, with the schools that we work and the experience that we have, can work really well in your setting. And it's based on the themes of my book that I wrote a couple of years ago about how to create a coaching culture in your school. So if we look at this now, this is the three, I suppose, stages that I would see a coaching culture being developed. So we've got three domains. We've got the fundamental domain in the middle, we've got the systemic domain, and then the transformative domain. And within each of these domains, we have subdomains. So in the fundamental domain, we have skills, then application. In the systemic domain, we've got individual, group, and then team. And the transformative domain, we've got a dialogue and then way of being. So what I'd like to do now is just to unpick each of these in turn to give you a bit more of understanding of what the stages can look like when you're developing coaching in your school, in your organization. So first of all, we look at the fundamental domain, which sits at the middle of our model here. And that is around skills and application. And the coaching definition is very much around a one-to-one conversation. So we're looking at enhancing learning and development. We're trying to increase the self-awareness of people and increase their personal responsibility, which again aligns a little bit with that teal organization timeline. But we're also looking to facilitate the learning in other people. And we do that through using different coaching skills. Now, when we're looking at coaching, generally what we'll find in organizations and schools is people want to jump straight to a model. So give me the model as quickly as possible, because in schools we like to go from problem to solution as quickly as we can. But what the way that we think we should do it is look at the skills first, before then we look at the application. A model is just a model. There's hundreds of coaching models. They don't mean anything. It's about getting the skills and the stance right to then apply accordingly. And in terms of skills, these would be the ones that we start with. So we've got the little hands there. That's about holding the environment. So creating the conditions conducive to get people working productively and to get them really driving their own learning. Then we have the two big basic coaching skills, questioning and listening. I think in education, people are very well placed for questioning, but it's about shining a light on that in a little bit more detail. Listening, generally, we're all terrible at, if I'm going to be quite honest. We're generally not good listeners. So it's about looking at different ways that you can listen and the nuances around that, from listening to the content, to listening to the somatic resonance, to listen to your own body as well. Then we have the empathizing, acknowledging, so really meeting someone where they are, the paraphrasing and the summarizing. So paraphrasing would be relaying information in a similar amount of words with the same meaning, and summarizing kind of cuts through. So a shorter amount of words that conveys a bit of I suppose, sharpness to what's been said. Then we have clarifying, which is a great coaching skill to turn up the heat a little bit in terms of challenge. So for example, what exactly do you mean by coaching? What exactly do you mean by have a productive meeting? What exactly do you mean by a positive school culture? So just really testing and probing a little bit more. And then forwarding the action, which is goal setting. So those are the basic skills that you look at in the fundamental domain. So essentially, this is a one-to-one relationship. We're looking at the skills and models that go into coaching. The onus is on the person who's coaching to look at the 7 skills. It's framed around a non-directive approach, which means that the other person has the answers. It's their agenda, and we don't tell them what to do. They work things out for themselves. And it's about that focus on goals and finding solutions to problems. So that's the first domain. That's the first stage of your coaching culture. And generally what you'll find is schools will sometimes get up to this stage, maybe not as nuanced, but that will be kind of where they finish. Whereas we think to go further is going to have more impact. So the next stage is the systemic domain. And this is looking beyond the individual. You know, we have lots of different stakeholders that we come to terms with and that we come into communication with throughout the day, throughout the academic year. So it's about looking at the different stakeholders, what's happening in the system, rather than just the one-to-one interaction. So in this domain, we look at the individual. So how do we be systemic when we're coaching individuals, then group coaching, then team coaching? I suppose in terms of this, we have to have a look at the systems at play first in your schools. And we would see these through 5 different lenses. So we've got the staff, which could be admin staff, professional services staff, teachers, the leadership, the students, and then the community. And then the community could be parents, could be governance, could be wider community. So when we're doing one-to-one coaching in the systemic domain, more systemically, it's about having an awareness of how you're working with your client around these different lenses. If we're looking at it group coaching, then group coaching is more about the coaching of an individual within a group context. And then the team coaching would be people who have a collective responsibility to deliver something. So that could be a senior leadership team. So in terms of the systemic domain, a little summary would be around this. We're looking at the individual to be more systemic in the way that we look at things, how we're interconnected as part of a community. We're looking at group, and that could be working, as I said, the individual within a group. So an example of the way that we could work with that would be, say, heads of phase in different schools or heads of departments. So they all have similar roles, but they have their own teams, and looking at and cementing that action learning. And then the team, so working more with the team dynamics and how the team interacts with the different stakeholders around them. So essentially, in the fundamental domain, we're kind of one-to-one like this. In the systemic domain, we're widening our breadth. And through this, that's much more, I suppose, emblematic of what you'll find in a school. The final domain is the transformative domain. And this is around the dialogue first and then a way of being. And we look at this around a skillful dialogic partnership. So it's about being co-created. So by this stage, yes, we'll know that, you know, the 7 skills of fundamental coaching. We can coach through a model one-to-one. We can coach more systemically. Maybe there's group coaching going on in the school. Well, there will be. Maybe there's team coaching going on in the school. Maybe people are facilitating different things in relation to all those. When we get to the transformational domain, this is about looking at dialogue. So how we can describe dialogue. Well, it's actually different ways that you can do this, but it's listening and suspending your own views around what the direction of the dialogue will be. This could maybe encompass monologue. It can encompass debate, skilled conversation, more generative dialogue when maybe there's not an agenda. And it's saying what needs to be said in a respectful way. So again, it's understanding different people's viewpoints. And there's different ways that we can structure that when we look in more depth as well. So what you'll find here is the way of doing are the skills. The way of being is your presence as a coach. So in the fundamental domain, you're starting to learn the skills. You're getting your knowledge up to scratch about what coaching is, what it isn't. And there's lots of different ways you can define coaching. There's lots of people, who maybe need some more information about what coaching could be in their setting. And the way of being, your presence, the way that you're comfortable with the coaching is just starting to develop. In the systemic domain, you're getting more skills, and your way of being in terms of coaching, your stance, maybe being non-directive, being comfortable in group scenarios, is getting better. In the transformative domain, you've got a lot more skills, and your way of being is a lot more comfortable. And within all these, there's lots of different areas that you can develop depending on the context of your school. So it's very much, it's not a one-size-fits-all professional development in terms of coaching. So in terms of the transformative domain, we're looking at dialogue and that presence. We're looking at different types of dialogue and defining yourself as a coach. What kind of models do you use? How aware of you of the way that you coach and maybe a good fit for you as a coach. So that's a little bit around the coaching, the three domains. Now, to get a coaching culture, we put all these together. So we've got all the different people, so the leadership, students, teachers, the staff, and the community, all being engaged around those three separate domains: the fundamental, the systemic, and the transformative. Now, once you've got those going, then you've got a true culture because everyone's included. So in terms of how we work with schools, we work through three different awards based on these domains. So the fundamental coaching award, the systemic one, and the transformative coaching culture award. And I think that's really, really around getting schools engaged with what's going on in terms of getting the best thinking into what we do. And a way this could work would be generally 3 years if you want to do the whole program. So some schools will look at one, the fundamental domain, and that'll be enough. Other schools would like to do the three. But you'd have lots of people coming in waves in terms of the training. So, for example, year one could be leaders and teachers would do some fundamental coaching training, which we accredit with the International Coach Federation. We also look at getting steering groups around strategy to align with your context, to make sure that it's what you're doing as a school, coaching supports that rather than being just another initiative. We also look at getting developmental feedback, mental coaching on your practice in terms of the International Coaching Federation core competencies, which are sector-wide coaching competencies, not just in education. Then this year two, that group would then do advanced coaching. So we'd look at things like somatic coaching, using the body in coaching, coaching outdoors, as well as coaching digital coaching, so AI-generated artwork, looking at the whole AI stuff, and we use experts within those different fields. You'd also do a group coaching project, dependent on your need and where that would be, and also a team coaching project. Then the staff and students in this example would be doing the coaching fundamental training. Then year three, the group who started the fundamental training and hadn't done the advanced training would then do some dialogue training. The groups in year two would do some more advanced training, and the last stakeholder, in this example, the community, would then come on board and get some fundamental coaching training. And by this time, lots of group and team coaching will be going on, and coaching will be at the heart of what you're doing. So I suppose what I'm getting across to this isn't a half-day workshop in terms of come and do some coaching and then you have a culture. Culture work, as you know, takes time, it takes commitment. And it's also, I suppose, to make it sustainable, it needs real insight and strategy around what you're doing and why you're doing it. After we've got those, then what we're finding now is with the people that we work with all over the world. So you can start to get a coaching union, so different schools connecting across school groups across the world around sharing expertise and coaching across different regions and different sectors as well. And then potentially going forward, this is what we're starting to see in terms of lots of schools coming on board and really looking at, as that teal organizational development said, a new way of education and a new way of looking at learning and professional development. So I'll just bring this to a close now and just give you a little flavor of some of the partners that we work with. We work with special schools, international schools, UK state schools, local schools abroad. I mean, everything really. And that really does come down to a commitment to actually to get where you want to get to, and doesn't really matter what sector you're in or what kind of context you're in. Got a couple of testimonials here, but I think the more important thing would be to give you our contact details if you want to take those down in terms of getting in contact. And then I'll come off sharing this and put the mic out for any questions that we have, or any questions that have been ignited for any of that quick presentation. Okay, so thanks everyone for listening. That's quite short and sharp, 20 minutes. I'd like to open the floor. A lot of the time the questions and the dialogue can be just, if not more, beneficial than the presentation. So if there's any questions on this, please put it in the chat box, or if you'd like to come on the mic, please feel free.
No one wants to be the first to speak.
I mean, it might be quite interesting to see if anyone is starting coaching, or they've got any questions around how they would start with the coaching in their schools. And then whilst people are thinking about that, maybe I can give examples of how people are kind of using it, I suppose. So we're working with schools who are using it around appraisal. There's lots of schools now looking at how they can soften that, make it more developmental. So that's potentially middle leaders starting the coaching training and looking at how they can get better at those conversations. We're also working with schools around learning talk. So again, looking at the way that they talk about teaching and learning. We're also working with schools who are looking at more with students. So students are starting to do some coaching training. And some really interesting stuff going on around student leadership in terms of the coaching that they're having. So yeah, lots of different things going on in different schools. That's why a lot of the time we spend time at the beginning looking at the strategy and getting a coherent strategy for you. Yeah, making sure that it's fit for purpose for you. Hi, Keith, you came on the video then. So does that mean that you want to ask?
Yeah. Yeah. I was a little bit late to the party. Someone knocked on my door about 1 minute to 11. I've got a question now. I'm in the middle, or I'm coming to the end of doing my level 7 coaching, and it's been really interesting. And we're trying to introduce the coaching culture and the appraisal, which has been, I would say, moderately successful. The problem I've got, and this is maybe where I'm looking for advice, is I described sort of coaching conversations to my deputies, who then have their line management meetings, and they have tried to, like you say, soften their appraisal by using more of that developmental questioning style. But it hasn't been particularly successful. In fact, it's gone awry a couple of times, because and what I'm looking for is how much training do they need? Because I mean, as much as I've been doing the course and I've learned a lot, to pass that on to someone, I'm not a trainee of coaches, a trainer of coaches, sorry. So maybe I just didn't explain it well enough. Do you think they need to be doing professional courses before you let them loose on these, on their direct reports?
Yeah, some good questions there, Keith. I think it's about rewinding, and I think a lot of the time what we don't focus on when we're looking at coaching is the contracting. So I suppose, how has it been set up in terms of communicating with all stuff about what you're doing, how it's going to look, and maybe some examples. So a lot of time when we see coaching, people jump straight into coaching rather than spending time at the beginning. So, for example, at the first, if you've got, say, middle leaders at the first session, you should be talking about, okay, we're looking at changing this potentially. This is what it potentially could look like. This is kind of what we're doing as a school to try and shift it a little bit. These are some examples of what it might look like. Is there any review in there in terms of giving people something to review how the coaching's gone? Is there a review at the end of every session around how that coaching's been beneficial? What's been the challenge? So there needs to be, I suppose, the contracting of how you set it up, both collectively in cultural work, but also individually in those meetings. And then after every meeting, especially when you're kickstarting it, there should be a review of, from the coachee, or sorry, the coach or appraiser, what was beneficial here? How can we work better in partnership? When I did this, what was the impact? How was the challenge today? So it's really trying to get that partnership across. The biggest challenge people have when they're coaching in schools is not the skills. It's the stance, because you're all part of the same system. So there's hidden dynamics at play. There's politics. There's history. There's experience. So if I walk into a school which I do, and I coach a head teacher, they will probably open up to me very quickly, which they'd never open up to anyone else, because I'm not part of their system. I'm completely separate. When you've got people who are, there's a lot of things that need to be, are entangled there, which need to be, I suppose, brought to the surface and spoken about.
Yeah.
Also, I think in terms of the appraisal, there needs to be a discussion about, you know, you look for coachable moments. Coaching is not the answer for everything. So it's about people having the awareness of potentially what those coachable moments look like. And actually, when is it not a coachable moment? And that's the awareness, that's key.
Yeah.
Otherwise, there's that confusion. What is this for? You know, are you asking me, or are you telling me, or I need some support here? So are you going to signpost, or are you not going to signpost? So if you're rolling it out with that, Keith, what I would say is those people who are doing the appraising need, I mean, we do 10 hours of International Coach Federation training, and it's core competency stuff. So it's sector coaching wide stuff, and getting them to understand what they're doing and how they're going to be doing it, and then get the steering group that we have to be really sharp on the why, how it's going to be rolled out, and then how you're going to review it.
Yeah, I think that these are some of the issues we've probably had, especially with not having that contracting session at the start, and then I think they jumped into the coaching without a great deal of knowledge about what were they trying to achieve, and I think the staff didn't understand it. But I think one of the reasons I did the course myself was to have more of my own leadership style, to change it into more of a coaching style, which I think, I'm not sure if the middle leaders have understood that actually they could use a coaching style just in their general, you know, management, day-to-day management, without having specific coaching sessions.
Just to sort of interject there, Keith, exactly right. And what we find is the first award that we do is more about one-to-one, and that's why we don't jump to a model, because everyone wants a model. Give me a model and I can coach. No, it's nothing to do with the model. Coach, it's nothing to do with the model. It's nothing to do with asking open questions. And I think what you'll find is we start to learn the skills and then use those across your role. Doesn't matter if that's with parents, it might be in your classroom, but start to identify when are you using, I suppose, more scaling questions or more open-ended questions across your role. How's your listening changing? You know, where do you find yourself using these across your role? So you're practicing them, because that's what happens. And then when you come to a one-to-one formal interaction, when you could potentially use a model, you've already got those skills, I suppose, that you're used to using, that typicality, rather than I'm going to save all my skills just for that 1/2 hour, 3 times a term or whatever it is, 3 times a year. And then outside of that, I'm not going to think about it.
No,
So
that's good.
Skills first, then the model comes after that. And then with the spirit that we have in schools, what always, I think this is brilliant, is the organic stuff that comes up. It's never the stuff that you plan for in coaching sometimes. So for example, I was down at school last week, and some of the feedback from we've been working with an academic year was, I'm using it actually across different facets of my roles. So I've been using it with my line management, but I've been using it with parent conversations. I've been actually using a coaching model with a parent conversation, and I just did it. And other people say, I've actually been using it in my personal life when I've been speaking to friends, whatever. It permeates everything, because nothing's in isolation. And that's the stuff that you need to capture.
I did find that I ended up doing it too much in my SLT, which is just give me advice. Just tell me what I've got to do.
Yeah. I think it's having the purpose of why you're doing it, what you hope to achieve. The contracting is key.
Yeah. All right, thanks.
Pleasure. I think someone put something in here around to raise awareness of a coaching culture at school. I think it links a little bit, Mr. Iman, to what I said to Keith about the contracting. So it's like any initiative. You need to sort of understand why you're doing it. What we find works well is kickstarting it with our training, if we can, face-to-face, so that we have the opportunity to talk to people. People don't necessarily want to agree with you, but they want to be heard. So giving people the opportunity to be heard, to ask questions, as we're doing now, can get all that, I suppose, the fragmentation out, and to create a bit of flow into an initiative. So you want to be telling people what you're doing, why you're doing it, which works particularly well, and then giving a forum to people to ask any questions in terms of what that is, but also not just at the beginning, but also how are you actually reviewing things as it goes. So as I said to Keith, you know, we make sure that the school's got a steering group so that they're on the ground all the time. They're reviewing how we're using coaching, what's the feedback coming back from some of the things that's happening. So it's kickstarting it with your why. how it fits into your school mission, how does it fit into your vision or your school development plan. So what's the why you're doing it? And then it's giving people the opportunity to ask questions and to review as you're going forward. A couple of great questions. Anything else? See, there's nothing else. Lucy, anything? I've got Anna and Anna here.
Hi. I found it really useful. We introduced coaching to right across our school 2 years ago. So each of our colleagues, we have probably about 120 teachers in our school, and they each receive 2 sessions of coaching a year. We're about to start a new section to this in September. We're rolling it out with the Y, with all our faculty leaders and program leaders in the next couple of weeks, because what we'd like to do is have each faculty leader, there's 9, and they obviously kind of line manage program leaders, assistant program leaders, and then a range of different staff from there. Each of those leaders are going to have a coach working with them, so that faculty leader has a line manager who kind of looks at teaching and learning and curriculum, and then the coach works alongside them with supporting their team in terms of teaching and learning and culture. So we're kind of just at the process of rolling that out. So it's quite interesting to listen to what you were saying about the systemic ideas. So thank you.
Yeah, and one thing that comes to mind there, Lucy, is, you know, it sounds like it's ripe kind of territory there for things like group coaching. And one thing in terms of action learning sets around teaching and learning. So one person, say you've got a group of 6, you don't want to have the groups big, group of 6 people, say, talk about teaching and learning. Then say you've got 6 sessions, one half term, and then maybe there's 2 ways to do it. One way is one person's the lead person, they bring a challenge to that 6.
Yeah.
Then if other people coach, then what they can do, and it potentially can be facilitated to start with, but they would start to coach that person on that challenge, which generally that challenge would be something that everyone recognizes anyway. It's similar stuff.
Yeah, generally.
Yeah, generally. Yeah. And then you coach that, and then that person then kind of comes to a decision about what they're going to do taking forward.
Yeah.
And they put it into play. And then the next set, they feedback on how it went, and then you swap the lead person. So you can continue doing that. Now you can do that so that one person has the floor in one session, or you could maybe, depending on time, a couple of hours, and you could do 3 or 4 people in that one set.
Yeah, carousel.
But it's keeping that to action, come back, review, and then you all learning from each other. And if people are already coaching, it's a lovely opportunity for them to be coaching each other. But again, what I'd say is it needs contracting, and it needs
absolutely
before that kicks off.
Yeah, definitely. Especially when you were talking about not the skills, the stance. I thought that was very, very interesting.
Yeah, and that can be really interesting. And again, that could be done across, how big your school is, but across different parts. And you can also get that in terms of, if you're looking at strategy, I mean, look at school, what's fragmented or what's blocking stuff in your school. And then you can look, okay, so how do we create flow here? Well, one way to create flow is to maybe get an action learning set or some group coaching with people who are stopping the block, or people who need, or around an initiative or something.
Yeah.
To get that dialogue going.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you very much indeed.
Pleasure. Any other questions? Thanks, Lucy. And thanks, Keith. Any other questions? Got Anna Shaw or Mr. Mustafa? Okay, no problem. Well, you've got my email. Well, you will have my email address. So Karen will send a follow-up with the recording with all our details, because I work with a group of partners as well. We have some fantastic coaches that work with us, all top-notch quality, and not all from education as well, so bringing in different ideas. And we also work with a range of consultants. So we work with people from mindfulness in the military to professional sports to all sorts of people who again feed into our programs. So we've got a great roster of people to support. So once you've got our details, if you've got any questions or any more information, please feel free to reach out. It'd be great to have a chat with you. thanks for coming today. It's been quite short and sweet, but I think that's great. It's been lovely to see you. Thanks for making the time, and look forward to keeping in touch going forward. So thank you.